she had a younger brother, but unfortunately he was kind of kept underfoot and sort of ignored by the mother. The mother wanted to live vicariously through Marjorie. Now, when Marjorie was young, she was taking the singing lessons, and the singing instructor told the mother not to waste her money. She wasn't going to be known as a songbird anytime soon, but I know of Marjorie as a mockingbird, because she was great at taking what people said and writing it out in their dialect and copying their lingo exactly. She was also very good at poking fun at others and making satire, so she was a mockingbird in two senses. Now, when Marjorie was 11 years old, she entered a short story contest with the Washington Post, and she ended up winning the grand prize of $2, which wasn't a lot of money, but was a lot of money for a kid back then. And her mom agreed to match her prize winnings and also let her go free from work whenever inspiration to write struck her. So if there was a chore that Marjorie didn't want to do, suddenly she was inspired to write. Now, Marjorie would tell stories to neighborhood children in that Washington, D.C. suburb, and she would tell stories about wolves and make wolf noises to go along with it. And these wolf noises were so scary that one of the children had to be warned when there was a wolf coming up in the story. He had to go home beforehand because it was too scary for him. And she would include wolves and bears and other stories like that in her work later on in life. And she said that was sort of a callback to some of her first stories that she told sitting on the stoop talking to the neighborhood kids. Now, when she was young, she would spend the summers on the family farm, located about 10 miles south of Washington, D.C. in the Rock Creek area of Maryland. And while she was on that family farm, her father very much encouraged her to fall in love with nature and fall in love with farming. There was a time when Marjorie climbed out of the window of the second story of her house and climbed down a cherry tree and then danced around a chestnut tree under the full moon. And her mother was mortified because she was getting her nightgown ruined, but her father said it was the only sensible thing to do on a night like that night. So they had very different parenting styles. Now, Marjorie had a very close relationship with her father and was absolutely devastated when he passed away when she was 17 years old. He passed away of a uremic coma unexpectedly. After that happened, they had to sell the family farm, and they had to go to Madison, Wisconsin, which is where the father had wanted his children to go for university. While she was there in Madison, Wisconsin, she enrolled in drama classes, and she got to write plays and act in plays. And her mother loved when she acted her plays because it was like being a star. Now, while she was there, she also wrote for the Wisconsin Literary Magazine, and while she was writing for the Wisconsin Literary Magazine, she met another student who also wrote for the WLM, and he also wanted to be a reporter when he grew up, and his name was Charles Rawlings. Now, as you can figure by the last name, what happened next was they decided to get married. They fell in love with each other, and against the mother's advice, they got married in 1919, the year after Marjorie graduated. And after that happened, they went to Rochester, New York, which is where Charles's parents lived. And while they were there, they ended up working as some odd jobs, being publicists and secretaries, advertising work, and stuff like that. They worked as reporters from time to time, and they had some little odd jobs. But it wasn't what they really wanted to do. What they really wanted to do was to get their longer pieces of work published. They wanted to get their books published out there. And unfortunately, they were just getting rejection letter after rejection letter. Now, Marjorie got a job as a syndicated columnist, writing a column called Songs of a Housewife. And these were poems about being a good wife, taking care of children, cooking for the family, caring for kids, all that stuff. And it was rather ironic that she had this job because she had just gotten married, she never had kids, and the first time that she had to cook for some friends, they gifted her a cookbook in return. So it was only later in life that she really mastered cracker cuisine and learned how to cook properly. Now, she was great at talking to people and incorporating their stories into her work. So she would say, "You baked the most wonderful pie. What was the recipe?" Or, "You helped to cure that child of croup. How did you cure him?" And she would incorporate their stories into her work, and she would use that throughout her time when she came down to Florida, and she used it to great effect when talking with the local crackers. Now, her mother passed away, also pretty unexpectedly, and Marjorie ended up getting a sizable inheritance from her. She wrote a book about her relationship with her mother called Blood of My Blood, and that, although she attempted to get it published and attempted to submit it to a contest, was rejected, and she ended up giving up on it, and she never wanted to publish it again after that point. It ended up being, she said, it was too close to the work of Jane Austen, or it was too melodramatic, it wasn't what she wanted. So it ended up being that her other works were not getting through, and she was deciding that it was time for a vacation because it was bleak and dreary in March of 1928 in Rochester, New York. And they decided that what they needed to do was they needed to visit Charles's brothers, who lived down in Island Grove, about 4 miles from here. And they came down to Island Grove, and they got to see the property. They got to see Florida for the first time, and they really fell in love with the place. They got to meet the local crackers, and for those that don't know, the local crackers were the sort of cowboys that settled this area, and they were called crackers because they had heavy cowhide or deerhide whips that they would crack above their cattle to drive them. So if you're going to be talking about cracker architecture or cracker cuisine, those are the culture that I'm talking about. So she fell in love with the place. That was a wild place under the sun, and they decided that what they were going to do is they were going to sell everything that they owned in Rochester, New York, and they were going to purchase a working orange grove and have that take care of them financially so they could sit back, relax, and write what they wanted to get published. It was not going to be that easy for them. So they ended up going back to Rochester, New York to sell everything, and they had the brothers who were in land speculation gig at the time looking around for properties. Because back then you didn't have Zillow or Redfin, you had to rely on letters coming in talking about different properties. And a letter came in talking about this property here, saying it was 72 acres, had 1,000 citrus trees, 800 pecan trees, 150 chickens in coops, 2 mules, 2 cows, a bunch of farm equipment, a farm truck, a barn, a tenant house, and a rambling farmhouse, all on the property. And Marjorie and Charles thought this was a perfect place to purchase, and they purchased it sight unseen for $14,400 using Marjorie's inheritance from her mother. She purchased a property that she never would have approved of. And she put half of it down using the inheritance, and the other half she put in mortgage. So they finally got to come down to this property in November of 1928, and they got to see it for the first time, and it kind of took them aback a bit because it had everything the letter promised it would have, but the condition of the houses left a lot to be desired. So when she came here, the house was not the brilliant white that you see it is today. It was actually battleship gray. It was this all gray color. The main peak of the house that's got the high peak on the chimney on it, that was the first section of the house that was built in 1884, 1886, around that time period. And that was the original cracker cabin. That was the first building that was built. And the previous owners of the property then built in 1900 the back section of the house that makes up the kitchen, and that ended up being the second section of the house. And finally, the family that had the property before her, the Armstrong family, had 2 teenage daughters. And both teenage daughters wanted their own bedroom. So what they did was they purchased a tenant house from a neighboring property, and they rolled it down the street using logs and mules and oxen, and they rolled it into the place on the opposite side of the house to make up the bedroom wing of the house. Now, the house did not have everything that she had expected it to have. It had a metal roof that leaked horribly. There was no electricity inside the house. As far as an outhouse, you had to use as far as restrooms, you had to use an outhouse that was located behind the house. And if you wanted to take a shower, you had to take a shower underneath the water tower, which was located behind the white pump house, the little white shed out front there. And while you were there, you had to take a shower outside, and it would be whatever temperature it was outside. So it'd be great on a day like today when it's hot, but during the winter, she described the shower as a device fit for a masochistic monk. It was this icy spray of water coming down on you. We can get up and we can walk over and see the house now.